Let me ask you a question. How does one create an amazing sequel? How do you build upon a game that had such an incredible beginning, such as Dragon Quest? The second game would have to be more expansive, more involved, and push the limits of the current console to its max. Well, in 1987, just 1 year after the original, Dragon Quest II, Luminaries of the Legendary Line was released to the world with critical acclaim. So, if you're brave enough and willing to travel, well, where many have gone before, but this time you're doing it, come along with me and experience the amazing journey that is Dragon Quest II. Dragon Quest II takes place around 100 years after the events of the first game. After the defeat of the Dragon Lord, the young Aleph set out with Princess Gwaelin and conquered new parts of the world, spreading his influence across the land. It's here that we are introduced to the first of his line, the royalty of Moonbrook, who are currently under attack by the foul minions of Hargon, a new evil. The king, using the last of his strength, sends his daughter the princess away to safety. A single brave knight of Moonbrook travels to a neighbouring castle, that being Middenhall Castle, who are relatives of the Moonbrook royal family. He arrives on death's door, managing to warn the people of Hargon's coming before his passing. Now, we play Dragon Quest II as the Prince of Middenhall, known as Prince Alan. Our quest is simple. Just like in Dragon Quest I, we must stop a villain from taking over the world, but this time, we are not doing it alone. This is a huge difference and the major one between 1 and 2. This time, the combat has been heavily expanded by adding party members, but we have to find them first. So, with some hints about nearby towns, let's set out on our quest. First up on the list before we do anything, yeah, you guessed it, we gotta grind for a little bit. Dragon Quest II is actually regarded as one of the hardest Dragon Quest games. This is mainly due to how open the game is and how easily you can run into areas you aren't ready for. With the right preparation and defensive playing though, you can get through this game without too many issues. I also know it kind of goes against the spirit of Dragon Quest, but honestly, for the older games, I would recommend popping up a guide if you get super duper frustrated or you want to know some good grinding spots. This game will not give you any freebies, but hey, have a notebook and write down as much as you can. That will help you out a bunch already. After grinding for a bit, we arrived at the first village of Left Something or Other. By asking around, we actually learned that Cannock, another neighbouring castle, is nearby to the north, and hopefully we can find a prince to join us on our quest there. Upon arriving at said Cannock, we find out that the prince has heard of the dangers of Hargon and decided to set out on his quest preemptively. So now we're on a bit of a wild goose chase, running across the country to find where he went last. This is pretty funny honestly, and it kind of gives you a good indication of the prince's character. You know, he's a bit rash and impulsive, but ultimately he has a good heart and brings to action the memories of Aleph himself. We search for him in a nearby cave, to which we find that he's already been there and has now headed to Middenhall to find us. Upon returning to Middenhall to talk to our father, we find out that the prince just left and went back towards Cannock because he heard we were searching for him. Let's just stop at Left Something Rather in the meantime before Cannock and... wait, who is that in the inn? Well, the Prince of Cannock now joins us on our quest, and all that's left is to find the Princess of Moonbrook, and then our party will be fully formed and we will be ready to search for our next step at tracking down Hargon. So how do we find this princess? Well, the same way we found the prince, by exploring. Continuing to explore the map, I found a little dungeon which gave us a silver key. Now, keys work a bit differently in Dragon Quest II. Rather than needing multiple magic keys like the first game, all you need is the silver and gold key, and there's also a jailer's key. Once you got one of each, you can open any of those kind of doors with unlimited uses. But we don't need to use this right now. What we do need to do though is go through this little shrine, and after some winding tunnels and a trek across a new continent, we have arrived at the next town, Moonahan. As always, it's important to talk to everyone, and we find out a few things. Mainly that Moonbrook, the castle that was attacked, is close by. There's also some kind of magic cloak in a tower nearby that'll help us on our quest, but let's find the princess first, and I think the destroyed castle of Moonbrook is our best bet. Now, it's not a long walk to get there, but it is quite treacherous. This is of course because well, it's a new area, but also because of something that a lot of people really dislike about Dragon Quest II, and is a big reason why they also consider it a hard game. That is that the encounter rate is incredibly high. In most areas, you'll be encountering an enemy fight, every 5 to 15 steps. Sometimes I would even step immediately out of a fight and get into another fight, which is pretty frustrating. This, is why the difficulty is pretty high, and you've got to exercise as much caution as you can when exploring the open world. Sometimes you get close to your destination, but because you're so low on HP, it's better to just use a Chimera Wing or zoom back to the inn and just try again. Hope your RNG is better, but maybe you're lucky enough to have leveled up and got enough coins to make the journey easier, which is another big part of Dragon Quest. Honestly, if you can deal with the high encounter rate of Dragon Quest II, the rest of the game is super easy and really fun. After finally arriving at Moonbrook Castle though, it is a shell of its former self. Monsters now roaming the halls, poison water seeping around its edges, and flames of the deceased flickering on the castle grounds. You can talk to these flames and learn some vital information, the main information being that the princess has been cursed to be a dog for the rest of her days. Another flame tells us that a mirror exists in a swamp to the east of here. I'm sure you can see where this is going, right? In order to undo the curse of the princess, we must retrieve this magical mirror and cast it upon her. Adventuring across the map to find these items really paints a picture. Just imagine the two princes, descendants of the great hero Aleph, traversing the swamps to find the only object that can save their blood relative, the Princess of Moonbrook, from a terrible curse. Lucky for us, the princess handled this quest super easy. We return to Moonahan and free the princess of her terrible, terrible fate. We have the princess. The next part of our quest begins. Now that our party of heroes is finally assembled, we can work on getting access to other parts of the map. Now our first objective is to get that cloak that lets us glide, as I can imagine it's going to be very, very useful coming up. The place this cloak is in is a tower not far from Moonahan as well, and I consider this tower to be the first proper dungeon of the game. It is a pretty standard affair with you climbing higher and risks of falling off the edge. Honestly, there hasn't been much enemy variety in this dungeon and even in the overworld. It's just the high encounter rate you gotta worry about. But after some exploring and going up these winding pathways, we finally find the Windbreaker. And with this Windbreaker, we can now travel to the other side of this entire map by going to another tower. It looks very similar, but it has a unique purpose. Once we get to the top of this tower, with the Windbreaker equipped, we can jump off the top of it and get to the other side of the whole map. We explored the world, we listened to people, and because we did, we got to the next part of the game. I know it's kind of stupid just describing because that's how games work, but hey, discovering things and being able to explore more of the map because you did it is always going to be a cool thing in games. As we're exploring these new lands that we found, we arrive at Rippleport, a port town with a very tiny port. So small in fact that an old man can block you from getting onto the ship. But as luck or unluck would have it, his relative is being attacked by some monsters while everyone in the town is just straight up ignoring her screams for help. So let's kill them, and I'm sure you can guess what the reward is going to be for saving her. Yep, the old man gives us his boat to use. Getting this boat now unlocks the entire world at our fingertips. While the waters are also treacherous, sailing makes an absolute breeze out of travel. And just to the right of Rippleport, by the way, stands an all too familiar land, the land of Alefgard. And it's at this point you now realize how huge the world of Dragon Quest II is compared to the original. And it's amazing to see just how far Aleph from Dragon Quest I went and how much lands he conquered and he connected together. Since we're here, let's visit the original castle of Tantegel and see how things are. Now, these people don't reveal too much about the world, except that the current king of Tantegel is locked away in prison. Weird. And I gotta say, exploring this castle is kind of nostalgic for a game that I played not too long ago, but think about it back in the day. Just think about it back in the day. Since we are so close though, we may as well explore the remnants of the Dragon Lord's castle. I mean, if this new Dragon Lord is going to set up anywhere, surely the iconic castle from the first game is something he's going to consider, right? The Dragon Lord's castle is pretty dangerous. It's full of mummies, imps, and gorgons at every turn waiting to strike you down. But it's actually not so bad because you've got that party dynamic, and this for me really shows the difference between 1 and 2. I know party members are commonplace nowadays, but think back then. A journey that you took with allies for the very first time, this was a revolutionary concept. Right now, you are treading the same ground you would have done just a year ago, but you get to see the fruits of your labor in the form of your descendants, who, while they all have different skills, all embody a different part of the original hero. Alan has the raw strength and tenacity, Prince Cannock has the ingenuity and tactile knowledge with combative spells, and Perenelle has the restorative spells that heal not just her but the entire party. These 3 pillars, 3 cornerstones of the hero are now embodied, and it's really cool to see these in a party format. It just makes so much sense and is the logical next step in the evolution of RPGs, and it's really cool that it's right here that we can still play today. Once we reach the bottom of this castle though, we do see a familiar face, but luckily it's not the same one as we think it is. This is instead a descendant of the Dragon Lord. It's weird though because he's reserved. He seems unwanting to engage with the world above. And weirdly enough, he offers to aid us, saying we need to put him down in his stead and will give us some hints. Now, whether this is some kind of plan to take out his rival or he genuinely wants to help, I couldn't tell you. But we do need this information, and this information is vital. He tells us that by gathering 5 sigils scattered across the world, we can receive the blessing of the goddess, and we can use that blessing to defeat Hargon. So now we've got our objective. We've got to scour the world, find the 5 sigils, and once we do that, receive the blessing of the goddess, and that will clear the way to Hargon. Let's do it. The search for the 5 sigils is the biggest chunk of Dragon Quest II. There's not much direct guidance on how to find these unless you're using a guide, of course. The only way you can find them is by, well, exploring the map, checking it, going to every single blinking spot and exploring it as much as you can to find any clue. This really is the heart of Dragon Quest II, and once again the heart of the entire series. Completing this in any order, you'll be making memories and trying to discover these sigils, which will not only save the world and prove your worth, but show your passion as an adventurer. So you're probably wondering, well, where are these sigils? Let me give you a brief rundown on my journey to find all of them. Upon leaving the Dragon Lord's castle, I decided to sail down to the other end of the world. Fortunately, I found a small island which contained the Sun Sigil, and I was off to a great start. There was a remote fishing village nearby which taught us about a great sea cave that we can enter, but we need something called the Moon Shard to access it. Write that down for later. There's another dog here, and he shows us the location of a vital item, the gold key. Now, every single door in the world is unlocked for us to explore and find items. So I decided to go back to all the castles and steal, commandeer everything from the treasury. I mean, if I'm going to be fighting evil, I need all the help I can get, right? By the way, this works the same way as Dragon Quest 1. In these rewards that you're seeing, these seeds will upgrade your stats permanently and gear you up as you go. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. While visiting the castles, I went back to Tantagel because the king is locked behind a gold door. Turns out he had the soul sigil, and the man that was locked away isn't the king but an armorer. Where's the king then? 2 sigils down, 3 to go. Also, going back to Cannock, we do open another door and find Erdrick's shield. I did also find his sword in the Dragon Lord's castle and forgot to mention it. Going back and exploring all of these towns and unlocking previously locked doors will get us yet another sigil. Oh, that also reminds me, I did buy a jailer's key to open jail cell doors, but I don't want incriminating evidence of it, so yeah, I definitely didn't forget to film it or anything. Anyway, killing these little fellas nets us another sigil, the water sigil, 2 to go. I also did find old granddaddy's helmet, by the way. After some more sailing, I followed this thin river which brought me to the town of Sluice, which was recently robbed by someone. This criminal took the floodgate key, which is needed to access the moon tower, which, yep, I'm sure you can guess is where the moon shard is. Damn, it sure pays to retain information. After some literal digging inside of his cell, we find him making his escape and he gives us the floodgate key, which allows us to open the gates of the flooding, and it allows us access to the moon tower. Though, I did also notice that there's a remote castle nearby in this little island on the east side of the map, and it's called Durkendor, so I decided to explore that before going to this tower. And after arriving, the king offers us a reward for putting on a good show. I'm pretty high level at this point, so why not? And after defeating this cat in combat, the king bestows us the Moon Sigil. That means there's only 1 more to go. And I actually just stumbled upon the last sigil by exploring a lighthouse. It was convenient, the final sigil is now mine. That's all 5. But something is bugging me. We now have all 5 sigils. There's not much left to do, and the climax is quickly approaching, but there's still some loose ends to tie up, because, well, we still have one last big trek to make. The delivering of the sigils, and of course, to find Hargon at the heart of it all. Well, first up, we still have to get the Moon Shard, and after a short little grinding session, I did end up climbing the tower and beating it pretty easily. As now that we have the Moon Shard, we can access that cave. The Sea Cave is one of the last hard pushes to the end of the game, but it does serve as a really good spot for some additional levels as you work your way through it, and money if you need it. And at the heart of the Sea Cave is another item we'll need later, the False Idol. Now with the False Idol and all 5 sigils in our hands, it's time to go to the shrine that the Dragon Lord's descendant mentioned and receive a key item from the goddess of the world, Rubris. Now that we have the Eye of Rubris, we only have one more town left to explore, Baran, the floating city which is on the outskirts of Hargon's base. Fun fact, if you rest here, which you most likely will, Caradoc becomes severely ill for some reason and you have to find the means to cure him. I'm gonna save you the trouble. You need a Yggdrasil leaf, which is on its own little island at the bottom of the map. While inside Baran, we can walk to this teleporter which places us just outside Renderak. A single soul in the form of a flame tells you to hold the idol aloft to gain entrance. Now, I'm not 100% sure who the flame is supposed to be. It could be Aleph himself guiding his descendants, but who knows? I mean, probably someone does. This game's like 30 years old. The cave to Renderak is another pretty big obstacle, but it's more due to its navigation and its crumbling floors that make it a bit of a pain to navigate. There's also a lot of great loot in here though, including Odric's armor, so it's a good spot to once again take your time, evac if you need to, and just keep chipping away at it. Once you finish this cave though, you are placed finally in the lands of Renderak, a cold, desolate mountainscape. The enemies here pack an absolute punch, and with the high encounter rate, you seriously have to be well stocked on supplies if you want to get through. There is actually a small shrine here which you can teleport to and get free heals from at any point, so if the area does get a bit dicey, at least there's a point close by you can return to. You can't help but feel bad for these poor 2 people who have been waiting in the shrine for who knows how long for you guys to arrive. Hopefully they use the teleporter right in front of them to get away every once in a while. Now from said shrine, it's a short walk to Hargon's castle, but it is a tough one. Like I said previously, the enemies hit like a truck, and I did find myself teleporting back every now and then to attempt the walk again. But it's okay, extra levels are always good, and it seemed like forever we've done so much getting these sigils, getting the band together. But we have finally made it to Hargon's castle after all of our trials and tribulations. Let's see what evil lurks within. Wait a minute, this place looks just like Minhall. In fact, you can still buy things and sleep at the inn and everything is fine. Something is definitely wrong here. Everyone here seems to praise Hargon, and the prince's so-called father says the same, that Hargon is like a brother to him. With the illusion now destroyed, revealing Hargon's real castle to you. But how do we get further inside this castle? Well, the same way we found the path to his realm, with the false idol. This castle is an incredibly easy final dungeon. It is just a straight shot to the top floor, with only a couple of the floors actually having random encounters, and I actually prefer this style of final dungeon to the big grinding ones in other JRPGs, where it feels more like padding or the game being dragged out. Dragon Quest II's final dungeon focuses more on the spectacle of the boss itself, and there of course are multiple bosses leading up to this, with increasingly harder bosses on each floor until you get to the final boss. But they're a breeze, and with all of his minions cleared, everyone fully healed up, it is finally time to confront the evil Hargon once and for all. And there it is, Dragon Quest II, an incredibly simple but strong journey. This was the game that introduced a party formula, the game that introduced a huge open world to explore with naval travel. This game captured the hearts and minds of so many people, and it makes you think back fondly on a game that just released a year prior. Looking at Dragon Quest II today, of course it doesn't seem like much, a very heavy encounter-based system with barely any guidance that's only a dozen hours long. But even so, decades later, for me anyway, it still captures that sense of adventure, the sense of duty you feel to honor the people that came before you, and the fact that you get to fight alongside this royal family, and that everyone is united against a common evil is really nice. There's no secret tricks at play, just a simple, pleasant story about good triumphing over evil. And I'm sure the heroes of the family of Erdrick will continue to keep the world safe. I really hope that even if you don't decide to journey into the world of Dragon Quest, at least by watching this video, you'll have some appreciation for this sequel that, in my personal opinion, surpassed the original. That's all I really have to say on Dragon Quest II, that is. It's an amazing game, and I hope that you'll maybe give it a shot and see what the journey is all about. I hope you enjoyed this video, and before I go, I gotta remind you to keep shredding. See ya!